Okay, good afternoon, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope podcast, and I'm here today with Paul Smith. He is a musical composer. Many of the listeners anyway, may know him. He's the co-founder of VOCES8, which is an a cappella group that's based in the UK. Um, and it's a chorale group. They sing a lot of different pieces. One of my favorites in particular is um, Let My Love Be Heard. It's a very emotive piece. Um, but I'm sure many of you have heard just they've done a whole bunch of different genres. But I wanted to talk to Paul today specifically about music. And Paul, just to kind of get started, can you tell me, when did your interest in music first start? Was it something you always wanted to do? Like as a kid, did you love music? Or what was kind of the inspiration for you?
Oh, well, first of all, hello. It's very nice to be a part of your podcast, and thanks for having me. It's really nice to talk with you. And what a good question to start with. How did it all begin? Also, can I just say that I love the choice you made of Jake's piece, Let My Love Be Heard, is absolutely stunning. We
It's
spent
my
some time.
favorite.
It's
Yeah,
beautiful, isn't it? The way it kind of grows through that middle section to this enormous climax is just, oh, every time I hear it, it just gets you right there. It's really
yeah.
spectacular. Um, and actually, we were doing some work with him a couple of months back in the Twin Cities, and he conducted us singing that piece with about 1,500 high school students in a very cold, snowy Minnesota. It was just a beautiful moment. So anyway, I'm very
Well,
happy to be here.
I just want to add to that. To me, I don't know about you, but it's a song of grief, but it sounds like lament. Like there's a difference between grieving and despairing, but like the song sounds very it's like a lament. It's going somewhere good, if that makes sense, because when you grieve, you can despair, or
Absolutely.
it can lift you up. And so, yeah, it's I've listened to it so many times, especially when I'm, sad or whatever, but yeah, it's beautiful.
There's that rising melody in the upper voices in the middle section, which is very much that sense of the the life that we live here on earth, slowly ascending into heaven and hopefully offering
Mm.
us something beautiful, however challenging we might find our particular moment. So
Mm.
it's beautiful. It's really stunning and definitely hopeful. To me, that's how I really interpret that piece, as well as the grief. There is that hope. But where did it all begin for me? It was well, I mean, my I suppose the thing that put me on the path to what my brother Barney and I did in starting Voces 8, which is quite a long time ago now. It's nearly 20 years ago that we started the group. Time flies. But it for us, both of us, it started actually when we were about 8 or 9 years old, and our parents were moving to London. We lived in the Lake District in the north of England. It's a beautiful part of the country, lakes, mountains, just stunning. It's one of my favorite parts of the UK, maybe my favorite part of the UK, to be honest. And my parents still go back there the whole time. We visit when we can. But my dad's job was taking us from this beautiful, idyllic countryside back into the city into London.
Mm.
And they were looking for a school for my brother and I to go to, and also for a new house. And they'd agreed,
Mm.
my parents, to meet up in Westminster Abbey to go house hunting together. And as they met in Westminster Abbey, they saw a poster on the wall that said, "Could this be your son?" And it was a picture
Mm.
of the Westminster Abbey choir. And so they didn't have a school for us yet. So they thought, well, maybe this could be something interesting. So they came home and talked to Barney and I about it and asked if we'd like to audition. And we said, yeah, that sounds great. We were like 8, 9 years old. We didn't really know what we were talking about, I'm sure. But anyway, we said we'd be keen to try. And we went to audition, and somehow both of us actually got accepted. We'd never really done
Oh
much
wow.
singing before then. And I think they told my parents I couldn't really sing much, but I could play the piano and I could read music, and they'd teach me to sing. That was their pitch. So at that point, we both went to the school, and it's a school with just 36 students. So the only students are the people who sing in the choir, and you basically go and live at Westminster Abbey
Mm.
for maybe 4 or 5 years until your voice changes and your treble years are over. And it was very much a formative experience. Suddenly you're singing for 3, 4 hours every day. you
Mm,
have a kind of routine almost as if you're in the military in some ways. It's boarding school and it's sort of up at 7 o'clock in the morning and you're run through a series of rehearsals, you're practicing instruments, then you do your lessons, and there's a
mm.
kind of routine to life. And each day takes you into an evensong in the Abbey every afternoon. And then on Sundays, we'd sing three services. So you'd sing Matins, Eucharist, and evensong. And so 8 times a week, you're singing
Wow.
the, this amazing choral music, and the amount of repertoire that you're learning and the skills that you're learning into how to sight read, how to read music, how to sing in a choir, it stays with you for life. And for Barney and I, this was very much the launch pad for us, if you like. So before then, we'd had fun singing this bits and bobs of things, but that was the time that really, for us, choral music became our thing. And
Well, I
from
was gonna
there,
say, because for 8 and 9-year-olds, I mean, that might sound really dull. Um,
it might.
like, yeah, I was gonna say, what? I mean, you've had to have, uh, I guess, how did that, was that cultivated in you? Because a lot of kids may say, well, that was, that's pretty boring. I mean, but for you, it's like, wow, like this was actually formative in a world sense. Like, did you like it at first as a kid, or?
I think it's a good question. I think for the first 3 months or so, I remember feeling very homesick. My parents still lived in the Lake District when I started at the school, so every day, you wake up, you're 300 miles away. You kind of wish you were able to see your parents, and so it's very tough. But actually, if you look at the cohort of people that I studied with, they did a bit of research on it actually, and it's almost a 50-50 split.
Mm,
Of the people who were there, 50% are now very well established professional musicians, and the other
wow.
50% really don't do anything musical at all. And there's no sort of middle ground in this environment. You're either all in or it's not for you. And there was definitely a sense that actually to do this is not a normal childhood. It's not the normal stuff. But at the same time, you're just hanging out with your friends most of the time. So you might be 9, 10, 11 years old. You wake up every day and you have 30 of your best friends are there with you, and you're, just normal kids playing football, playing all the sports, and then in between you're doing music and doing all the lessons that you should be doing. And so there is that element of childhood that you still live, but at the same time you're doing this thing which just becomes totally normal. It's as a 10-year-old, you just adapt so fast
Yeah.
into what it is that is expected of you, and it just feels like normal life. And so actually, sort of, we had these cloaks that we'd wear. I remember it kind of felt like being in Harry Potter, basically. And you'd walk around the abbey in these like crocodile formation, wearing these amazing cloaks, and you sort of. You walk around and there'd be tourists taking photos of you. And as a 10-year-old, you're like, this feels very weird, but it certainly doesn't feel boring. And as a singer, you're then touring with the choir. So we take trips internationally to the US or around Europe, or I think actually this was in 1994, something like that. The choir, the Westminster Abbey choir at the time, this was the end of the Cold War, and we were the first choir from the UK to visit Russia and to sing in the Kremlin
Oh, wow.
since the end of the Soviet Union. So actually, you're doing things which are just mad. I mean, we went on a tour and we had bodyguards, and it was on national television. Then you're making recordings. You're in Abbey Road Studios doing Hollywood films, and so it's sort of stuff that you end up doing it's like a childhood dream in a way, but at
Wow.
the same time, it's not easy. And so, as I say, it was a 50-50 as to whether it became something that was really embedded in you for life or whether the routine didn't work for you. But the
Was
one thing
there a
I would
chorale piece? Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna
say,
add, was there a chorale piece as a child that you really loved that you would all sing?
so, well, that's a good question. Every year at the end of the school year, the young singers who were leaving, so were age 12 or 13, they were the ones who got to choose the music for the last service. So normally, obviously, it's chosen by all the serious grown-ups. But every year, the piece that would get chosen without fail, because we loved singing it, was a piece called The 12 by
Yeah.
William Walton. And actually, I just recorded it with VOCES8 for my latest album actually, so it's on there. And I hadn't sung it for maybe 20 years. And when I got to put together my own album, it was mixing music that had inspired me growing up alongside my own compositions.
Hmm.
And the piece is just, it's at the core of music that I love. And so it's a very dramatic piece. It lasts 10 or 11 minutes, got with organ and singers, and there's some beautiful solos. And every year, that is the piece that would be chosen by the the choristers who
Hmm.
are leaving. So, but I mean, there's lots of others. Actually, my brother Barney um, has now got a 2.5-year-old son, and he named his son Orlando after Orlando Gibbons, who's a Renaissance composer. And
Hmm.
he particularly chose this name because when I went to the school and started a few months before he did, and he was missing me, much like I was homesick at the school, and my mum gave him a tape of the Westminster Abbey Choir singing,
Oh
and the
wow.
first piece was a piece by Orlando Gibbons, and apparently he just sat at home every night on a tape, like playing the piece, then rewinding it, then playing it again. He wouldn't go to bed; he just kept playing it. So there's definitely pieces as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old that you fall in love with and you just adore, but at the same time, it's not what the normal kids, if you like, might be might be going for. So I feel very much like I've spent my life as a choir geek, but I'm very happy to exist in that space.
Well, I was going to ask because the music, the specifically the group you co-founded, I mean, it's a very unique um sound, and it's not, at least for me, in a younger generation in America, it's not a very popular sound. Um, but I mean, I grew up in a classical environment, so it was something my parents encouraged. But I mean, it's beautiful. It's very soulful. Um, but it's not, yeah, it's not something that a younger generation really leans to. Um, I was going to ask you, what do you think is very special and important about it? Because it is a very unique genre. Um, and what do you find that it contributes to music?
I think that's a fascinating thought. For me, I very much recognize that what we do is not pop music. We're probably not going to be the next Taylor Swift. But at the same time, I sort of feel like the music that we make is part of something that has existed within certainly within our Western society for many, many centuries. So when I talk about my childhood and being at the Abbey, you get the sense that you're part of a tradition
Mm,
that is much bigger than you, that you are singing music that's been written 500 years ago, or if it's not written 500 years ago, it's inspired by the music that has existed for many hundreds of years. So there's a sense of, for me, a through line in the music
mm,
that we sing that goes back way beyond anything that exists in the sort of more modern culture. And actually, if you look at the kind of ancient harmonies that we sing and the transition of choral music across the last 500 years and how those harmonies have played a role in developing the music
mm,
that Taylor Swift writes today, actually it's there. And so even though we're not sort of at the cutting edge of pop, actually, if you look at the harmonic language um, that is used today, a lot of it was born a long time ago. So the music that we sing um, comes from that place, but still, to me, has a relevance today. I also think that a lot of the music that we make, whether it's modern or ancient,
mm.
often it's people come to our music at a bit like you've talked about your experience with Let My Love Be Heard. You've you've used it in times that you felt you needed it. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that's very important and very it's very much something we're aware of as singers, that we never know how someone is experiencing our music, where they are in the world, what they're feeling, what they're using it for. And we meet people all the time after concerts and we talk to them. For me, one of the most fun things about what we do is the live performance element. So obviously we have a lot of our music is on all the streaming platforms and it's heard by millions of people in all sorts of different settings, which is great. But for me, the essence of what we do is the live music experience. So when someone
Mm,
comes to a concert, and they experience it in the moment, and then they meet us afterwards and they talk with us. And when you hear people's stories about how our music has been at their moments where they've experienced new life, end of life, marriage, pain, suffering, struggle, whatever it might be, the music that we create, we make it, we try to make it as beautiful as possible, we try to make it
Yeah.
as emotive as possible, and then we put it out into the world so that people can use it when they need it. And that might be they just like listening to core music, but actually, more often than not, it's I need something to help me feel better or to contemplate or for something. And I think that's at the essence of our work. And then on the sort of second side of things, alongside just people listening to music, one of our big um, focuses really since we started the ensemble is not just giving people music that they can hear, but also trying to give young people the opportunity to have the same experience we did when we were young.
Mm.
So how can we, not the full 4 hours a day kind of vibe, but how can we give you a taste that if it lands with you, you can then take and do something else with? And so a lot of our work actually is not just on the concert platform, but in an education setting, and we have a US foundation now, a 501(c)(3), I think we call it over there, and we have a UK foundation as well, also a French foundation. And with all these foundations, we've set up long-term programs in about 30 different cities and rural areas around the world, particularly around those three territories. And each year now, alongside VOCES8, we have a team of maybe 35 or 40 of us who are doing
Mm.
lots and lots of education work in lots and lots of places. So when I come to the US next time with VOCES8, whilst they're singing in some of the areas, I stop singing in the group and now I run the foundations. So I visit lots of areas. I do a lot of workshop leading, and we run big events with 2, 3, 4, 500 people, 1,000 people singing with us. And for me, that's a really critical part of what we're doing as well. Not because it makes us feel happy, much as we love it, but actually because the music that we're singing has this tradition, and we
Yeah.
just want to open people's minds to what that is, what that sounds like, what that feels like. And if that resonates with them, it might be something they then choose to pursue in the future. And I think that kind of role that we can have in our as performers, but also as educators, those two elements fused together, I think are
Yeah.
really critical in the work that we're doing.
Well, you mentioned stories before. It connects with them and it becomes part of their life, part of their story. Do you have one in particular that stood out to you that someone shared with you after a concert?
I don't know. That's very hard. We have so many. Um, what has struck me in the last year is how many people, or the last 2 years, let's say now, have been talking about COVID. I mean, it's such an obvious thing, but people couldn't go out, people couldn't be involved in the ways that they normally are.
Yeah.
So what we did during that period, because obviously we couldn't work, we went from having hundreds of concerts a year to having no concerts a year, and not being able to travel like everyone else, and all the other stresses and strains of that time that so impacted negatively on all of our lives. What we were able to do with we set up a series called Live from London, and we basically, because we have our own space in London, we set up a recording studio there, and alongside our ensemble, we also brought in any other professional ensembles who could get there basically to be involved as well. And we set up a massive sort of choral space, and it reached millions of people. And
Mm.
what strikes me now is that every live concert we go to, people have heard about us for the first time, have experienced our music for the first time in that moment of crisis, of pandemic, of global meltdown. This is when they found us. And so actually everywhere we go, we're really finding that that is the recurring story, not just from a single person, but from many. And I mean, we have oh, I found, there you go. I've stumbled upon one that's a particular essence. One of a person who's actually become one of our advisory board members, David. He and his partner couldn't get to spend time with their elderly mum during during COVID, So they would set up um, our music for her. They'd
Oh,
watch it at
wow.
the same time, and then they'd communicate with each other. And when they could go to visit, then they'd go to visit together, and they'd sit and experience this music, and it would be the thing that brought them together. And that sort of essence of community building through what we do, whether it's one person sharing it with another person or thousands of us in the same space, which is really the best thing about choral music when we all sing together. I think, yeah, it's very moving when you get to be connected to those stories and that narrative.
And I wanted to ask because you were getting into it a little bit and we backtracked, but you were talking about education and what you do now with the foundation too. Can you explain what the VOCES8 method is and how is that being implemented in such a way that's actually educating people more about music?
Sure. Um, so the VOCES8 Method is actually a book I ended up writing about 10 years ago based on a lot of the practical work we do in workshops.
Yeah.
So when we go to a school, what is it we do? How do we do it? Why is it good for the students? And it's all built around some of the great techniques that we've learned as we've been growing up, that we've adapted for our own purposes,
Right.
um, and I suppose it's addressing a problem that we identified, which frankly, since the book was published 10 years ago, it's a much bigger problem now than it was back then,
Mm.
sadly. And that's simply that music education, alongside many of the other arts, is just being squashed out of society, out of our education um, experience. And the idea of, I don't know if you know STEAM, and STEAM has become STEM, and effectively the arts, the A, has
Yeah.
been cut
Yeah.
from so many schools. In the UK, it's a major problem, I would say,
Mm.
and it's one that could be easily fixed with actually not a lot of money if the government decided they wanted to step in. But they don't. So what instead we're looking to do is to work out how arts organisations like ourselves can try to provide schools, communities with the support they need to keep music education happening. I mean,
Okay.
it's really that basic. So where a primary school, which is an elementary school in the UK now, doesn't have an obligation to have a music teacher. So they have the whole musical education experience of every child in the UK depends purely on luck. If there is a teacher in the school who is a mildly competent musician that
Mm.
and is keen to help,
Okay.
then you know the students might learn something. But there's no funding for it. There is no place for music, even though of course music is and can be used in so many areas of the education experience that we have at school. If you look
Mm.
at how teachers teach,
Yeah.
particularly with primary school students, singing songs is a brilliant way to bring the class together and to help the learning process. So, put simply, and you were asking me this just before we started the interview, seems a bit complicated. The VOCES8 method is basically designed as a learning tool for a
Okay.
teacher who does not know how to do music. So if you imagine this is the problem,
Okay.
I don't need to look after the schools that have a great teacher because they have a great teacher. But if there are thousands of schools in the UK, and this is not just a UK problem, it's becoming a global one. In the US, it's a major problem as well. We do a lot of work in France again because it's a major problem. Um, Germany is very good at funding the arts. Germany is about the
Mm.
one
Yeah, that's
place
right.
that there is good funding for the arts. I believe there are more opera companies and orchestras state funded in Germany than the rest of the world combined, which is sad, isn't
Wow.
it, for the rest of the world? So the idea of the method is very simply to use a bunch of very, very simple sounds, games, exercises, which connect sound making, not even singing often, because singing can be scary for someone who doesn't think they can sing. So it's sound making connected with movement, because movement is a great. As I say this, I know this is for a podcast, so you can't see me, but I'm doing all sorts of funny gestures. So we connect movement, which gets the brain active, and then we put sound making on top,
Mm.
and that becomes easier because we're doing the movement, so it distracts our brain from getting scared. And then we put in the third layer, which is effectively layers of different sounds and different movements. So if you think about what harmony is, when you listen to Jake's piece, Let My Love Be Heard, 8 different parts moving in lots of different ways. It's
Yeah.
basically layers of sound. The VOCES8 method is designed to help students and teachers who are not confident musicians create layers of sound without being stressed and in a way that is fun, that can be done very quickly, and that is basically also using lots of techniques that are proven to have a positive impact on the way we learn. So, what sort of activity might be good for numeracy? What might be good for literacy? What might be good for linguistics? How can that feed into other areas of the school life? So basically, the method book is kind of a 8 chapters, I think, where you can walk through different elements of world music. You can learn rhythms from South America, Africa. You
Wow.
can have some Asian harmonies and melodies. There's some beatboxing, which the teenage boys always love. There's lots and lots of different things that you stick together like a jigsaw, and they're totally able to be kind of, rather than Jake's piece, which is written down and you have to sing it that way. This is more
Yeah.
like here's different layers, and you can use them all with one other, two others, three others in many different ways. You can actually incorporate them into a different song if you like, because it's all just different patterns, and you can do it in a way that's fun, because that's really critical. So there are basically 3 issues, I think. Let's think about it. Money, that's the big one. Time, that's another really important one. There's no time in the school calendar for music to happen, so this can be done in just a few minutes. And fear is the third one. Teachers are afraid to sing, and if a teacher is afraid to sing, students aren't going to sing either. So the idea of the VOCES8 method is like, these are the 3 problems, and here's a book full of solutions, and go and have fun with it. So that was the basic idea of it. And actually, what started off as, I wrote down some ideas and scribbled it. Then it got published by Edition Peters, which was very exciting. And then it got translated into French and German and Japanese, and being used now in, I think, maybe 10,000 schools, maybe more. The idea is not really that people buy the book. The idea is that they understand the book and then they can share it without having to read or write or do anything, but just play. So it's something that's a sort of first step in everything we do. But I do a lot of work training teachers, coaching teenagers how to lead workshops in it so that they can go and visit elementary schools. So we're kind of building good pathways between different levels of education institution, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of complexity of academic thought behind it, mostly done by people far more intelligent than me. And then I'm the guy who makes it fun basically and created the jigsaw. And
Do
it's
you
all
know
done with,
if I was gonna
sorry, go.
ask, do you know if any of it's used even in special education schools? Because there's a lot of
Yeah.
music therapy, and I know personally, I've had some friends who've done music therapy with their children who've had special needs, and it's been amazing to see the progress that they make and the way they can express themselves through it.
Yeah, 100% is the answer. Yes, it's fantastic. And actually, one of the programs we were doing last year up in New Jersey with Montclair, there's a music therapy course there, and I spent some time coaching the music therapy students how to use these different devices in the settings that they were going to be going into. And in projects we're running in Philadelphia at the moment, and also in the Twin Cities, and various other parts of the US and the UK, St. Louis as well. We're using it not just in mainstream education settings, but also in a variety of different schools with a
Oh,
variety
wow.
of special needs students. It's very effective because it's the sort of stuff that can be very adaptable to whoever you're working with. So it can be something. This method is not targeted to an age group. It can be done with a 4-year-old. It can be done with a 20-year-old. It can be done with an 80-year-old. It doesn't matter. That's the idea. That everything is very fluid in terms of the way it can be used. So yeah, we've used it in all sorts of special education settings, and it's quite powerful because for me, in terms of the storytelling element, I don't know the students and the teachers really very well before I work with them, but the teachers know the students incredibly well. And when they come up to me afterwards with like this bursting energy of excitement because of what they just saw their students do, that they couldn't ever have believed was possible, and it's just using music in a game environment, in a very simple environment, but the impact it can have is tremendous.
Why did you want to make it? Like, what inspired you to do it? Was that you saw this problem specifically in the UK, or?
Yeah, I mean, we saw it in the UK first, but everywhere we go, we spend our life on the road, and so we're always visiting a lot of different places. And for us, that makes us, to my mind, incredibly lucky. Most people don't get to visit so many communities, so they can't build the same kind of picture. And
Yeah,
what we realized is everywhere we went, same problem. It's the same situation. Not just in one part of the UK, not just in the UK, everywhere we went, there are the same problems. And it starts to make you pretty angry after a while. I basically got mad and wrote a book which gets people to clap, which is not maybe the best idea, but that's pretty much what it was. And as we look around us, and I talked to you earlier on about this idea of tradition, this heritage,
yeah,
and it's being eroded, and it's the erosion is not stopping. It's like the sea is just battering harder and harder at these cliffs that are, and music education is closer to the precipice of the steep drop.
yeah.
And I love our art form, but I love all music and I love all art and the sense that we are creative people. And it worries me, it scares me that this kind of creative space might not be afforded in the right ways to the generations that come after us. So I sort of feel like it's a fight that we're in,
Hmm.
and we're just doing our best to make sure that we can be as supportive as possible to the people out there who share the same belief as us, that creative music making and the creative arts are an important part of every child's development.
What do we think? Why do you think it's so important? Music is so important for a child to be exposed to, and maybe if they don't end up embracing it as like their biggest love, something that they can appreciate.
I mean, I think music, and I mean, obviously, I have a bias towards singing in a group environment. But if we look back to the beginning of um, human existence, communities were communicating with each other by singing before they were speaking. So it's something that is so inherent to us as humans to stand and sing together. That I think it's a vital sort of connection in our, as deeply as it's in our DNA, that this is something that makes us experience life in a bigger way. I think it's very rare that I meet anyone who doesn't like music. It's very common that I meet people who don't like different types of music, and I think that's a massive relief. Right? That's great. But it's something that's every parent is going to share with their child their favorite songs. Every mother is going to sing a lullaby to their child when they want them to go to sleep. There's this kind of pattern of music that sits in our life, and it is something that makes us better people, and it's something that helps us. And if we don't sort of work hard to encourage everyone to understand that it's an important thing, that you don't have to be making music, but just to experience it, to find a love for it. I think we're not doing our job, particularly as musicians. This is the easy sell. Everyone likes music. I don't have to convince everyone to like my music. I just have to show them that I like music and this is how I make it. I don't want everyone to copy me. I just want them to then go away and find what it is for them that sparks their passion.
How do you think it, how do you think music makes people better? Um, yeah, you did say that. What do you
I
think?
think
How
I
do you
did
think it
say
makes
that,
people
didn't
better?
I?
Yeah.
I think when I'm angry, if I listen to music, I feel better. I think when we hit our edges, whether that might be um, grief, the music will help us find a sense of hope, optimism again, peace, calm. When we're doing something that we might find difficult, actually to go away afterwards and listen to some music will help bring joy back to what we do. If people have had a tough day at work, They get in the car, they put the radio on, they blare out their favorite songs, and they sing all the way home. There is a sense that music is a transition in our lives, and it's an important moment. It's an identity. And so when we can connect in a community with the music that we love, and obviously I think it's best when it's at a live performance of some form, people go out and they listen to music, they live it, they feel the vibrations of whatever it is, whether it's something huge. um, my girlfriend Daniela took me to a Beyonce concert for the first time last year,
Oh,
and
wow.
I felt the music. I was hearing it for 3 days afterwards. It's joy, it's passion, it's release, it's everything that helps us interpret our emotions in a way that somehow can help us make sense of things. Um, so I think music makes us better, and it's you know better people, actually, hopefully, yes, but better also from whatever state we might be in before we listen to the music.
Hmm. What do you think? Because many people would say music is a spiritual experience. Do you find that music draws you closer to the divine, or do you find a connection with it at all in a more spiritual sense? Or because specifically your a cappella group, I mean, that is one word I would describe it. It's very spiritual. It's very pure. Um, it just kind of gets back to the essence of things. Um, how would you describe it for yourself? Is that how you see it, or
Yeah, I mean, I like your description. I think when we stand and sing, there is a sense that we're not trying to sing our song. We tend to sing songs that have been written by other people. A lot of it comes from a spiritual space. We sing other stuff as well, but there's a lot of it. I think we're best known for that spiritual space. Doesn't have to necessarily be Christian, but there is a lot of it that comes from a Christian tradition.
yeah,
Um, and I think in the moments that we sing, you stop being a singer and you start being a part of something that is one instrument, that is
mm,
not about being one person, but about being eight people. And then it starts to be about something that is taking a piece of music that has been created with that idea, a narrative, a story of some form, and our job is as the storytellers. And so we're not the main characters. Our job is to help convey the text, convey the music, convey the emotion, whatever it might be. And a lot of that is quite deep, quite philosophical, quite spiritual, quite powerful emotionally. And as you said, I love the sense of stripping it back. It's pure. There is just a sense of purity to what we create. The sound world that we inhabit, the way that we all sing is quite light on in terms of vibrato, so we can really try and create additional harmonics in the music that we're making. So actually, eight voices, often because of the way the chord locks together, it creates a harmonic sequence around our sound, which makes the music again, the chords
yeah,
sound bigger. So there is a real delicacy, there's a real precision to what we do, but connected to the precision, there's also um, the emotional element of it, the
mm,
way we sing words. And that's, I think, we spend so much of our time talking about, whether when we're working with any other choir, about the importance of text and how you're telling a story. And obviously, you mentioned Jake's piece at the beginning, beautiful example of that. But every piece we do, we get to choose whatever language it's in. We're telling a story, and
yeah,
normally the music we're singing it because it's like the best music that has been cherished for the last 500 years. It's the stuff that survived and and has been nurtured and loved over that huge duration of time. So we're in a place now where we can sing this stuff that's really incredibly powerful, and it's our job just to put that music into its own place and then let it do its work. Let it be healing, let it be spiritual, let it be a space for people to feel something that makes their life better for them somehow.
yeah. Well, I want to ask you one last question because I know I appreciate your time. What do you think, what piece either that you've written or you've listened to, do you think expresses who you are? This may sound a little uh, sober, and I don't mean it to sound this way, but if you passed away, your funeral, right? Sometimes when people pick music, it really reflects their personality or something that they really were close or believed in, and that's what's played. Um, what do you think you would play for yourself?
It's a very hard question. uh, well, if I get to pick the piece that I wrote that ties back to the conversation that we had at the beginning of this talk, I talked about going to church 8 times a week, uh, and actually, there's a piece that you have to sing each night in evensong called the Nunc Dimittis, which is a Latin text, and it's the Song of Simeon, and it's the moment that he holds the baby Jesus in his arms. He's a very old man, and
Oh, the
he says,
prophet Simeon. Yes, okay.
"This is now that I know that the Christ child is here, I can depart in peace. I can leave." And there's a sense of incredible hope and incredible joy, but it's so intimate, it's so quiet, and it's so gentle. And if I'm looking towards what happens to me at the end, I hope it's like that. And I think that that piece, there's a lot of space in it, a lot of silence in it. And when I come to thinking about the way I like to write, I like writing music, but what I really like to do is think about the silence that I can find in the music. So where can I just
Mm,
drop a moment of total stillness in a way that an audience will not breathe, they won't move, there will just be this moment. And for me, those moments are the beginnings and ends of pieces when you find that total stillness of a collective on group of people. It creates something that is spellbinding,
mm,
yet nothing is happening. And I find that truly remarkable. And it's one of the things I love the most, actually, about um, the music that we sing. It's very gentle, it's very intimate. When you find that silence, it's when there's something magical that you can't even describe it anymore. I love that. So there's one pick for you.
Well, listeners, again, you're listening to the Lament of Hope podcast, and it was such a gift to get to speak with you, Paul. And it's so exciting too to be able to talk about music and the layers to music, the ways that music encourages and teaches others. So I highly encourage you. If you haven't listened to VOCES8, their music is beautiful, and there's a whole bunch of different types of songs to listen to. So, but again, thank you so much, Paul, for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.